Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for jumping on our live webinar today. We appreciate your participation. A couple quick things as we jump into our discussion today. The focus is going to be centered around digital transformation in utility engineering. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joe Eberly. I'm the Vice President of Growth and Sales Strategy at 4M Analytics. Before we get to introductions of our panel, a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, we'll be recording today's live event and sharing it with everybody who has registered. And then secondly, if you have questions, please feel free to pop those questions into the chat board that you'll find by clicking on the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. This will expand a chat window that you can ask your questions, and we'll do our best to respond to all of those questions. A little bit about us, since our marketing team has put all this together, I'd be remiss if I didn't do that for us. Our goal here at 4M is to be the leader in digital transformation in the utility industry by unlocking utility data from millions of sources for use during the feasibility, pre-construction, design, delivery, and maintenance phases of the infrastructure project lifecycle. So you can think of 4M as the Google Maps or the Apple Maps of the subsurface utility world. And we're doing everything that we can to make it easy to buy, to use, and to adopt within your organization. So digital transportation in utility engineering is the focus of our panel discussion today. Defining, implementing, and adopting a digital transformation paradigm is critical to ensuring that utility stakeholders are meeting the demands of utility management, utility coordination, and utility risk mitigation on infrastructure projects across the United States. That said, the challenges associated with such transformation are both multifaceted and complex, and are often overwhelming. This panel explores the ways in which companies are adapting to meet the changing demands, including technological innovation and stakeholder collaboration. More specifically, our panelists will discuss the impact of emerging technologies on improving efficiency, reducing costs, preventing damages, and increasing safety within utility projects. As we get started, I wanted to share a few data points in the construction phase that I think will give us some context for why digital transformation, specifically in the utility industry, is so critical. So it's estimated that about $5.4 billion is spent every year in construction technology in the United States. The breakdown of that is 53% of the spend is on increasing efficiency and collaboration with those technologies. Around 20% is spent on future technologies, things like robotics, AI, 3D modeling and printing, and so forth. About 15% on green and environmental construction methods. And then about 12% on supply chain improvement platforms. So the critical question that I think we all have to ask ourselves is, with this kind of technology investment, why have we seen construction production output remain flat, or in some cases in subsectors even decline? One theory is that an organization's ability to successfully navigate through the change management process of adopting a technology often becomes the most critical factor. Knowing this, I'd like to focus our conversation around the experience of successfully adopting technology as a part of our individual digital transformation initiatives. Let's start with a quick round of introduction to our panelists today. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Maybe I'll start with Bruce. Can you introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background, and then of course the company and the focus that you guys have?
Sure. Thank you, Joe. My name is Bruce Bacon. I'm the pre-construction manager for Sundt Construction's Texas and transportation market. Sundt Construction is based out of Tempe, Arizona. I've been in business for 130 plus years. I've been with them about 4 years in their Texas office in Irving, Texas. As a pre-construction manager, I work with the estimating, business development, and proposal teams to first of all decide on which projects or help decide which projects we'll pursue, and then help them with their proposals and anything in between if it has to do with estimating or any type of business development, pre-construction managers get involved with that. I've been in the business for 39 years, not counting the college shovel years, as you had to earn money to pay for college. But anyway, largely, mainly in the transportation and heavy civil markets in Texas and the Southeast.
Great, Bruce. Thank you for the introduction. Since we have two Johns on the call today, I'm going to call out your first and last name. Jon King, you're up next.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Joe. Jon King with VRX. I am the engineering manager for VRX. I have about 24 years experience in the civil industry. My primary background is railway and utilities, as the VRX is about 160-person firm. We're headquartered in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with offices throughout Texas, Oklahoma, and New York. We specialize in construction management, traditional text.CEI, municipalities, water and wastewater, construction management. We also have an engineering side that I oversee that is responsible for typical PS&E design for federal and state clients and also municipal clients. We also do water and wastewater. We have an environmental department. We do structural inspections. And the whole aviation department that covers our airport work. As manager of VRX, I also oversee our utility side, so that's utility engineering and utility coordination, where we support our CI projects and also our coordination projects for other clients. Thank you, Joe.
Jon, thank you. And last but not least, Jon Campbell.
Good morning. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Appreciate you all having me back. My name's Jon Campbell. I'm with T2 Utility Engineers. I'm the Texas branch manager for T2. T2 has been in the business of conducting advanced utility investigations for 30 years now, so we're a relatively specific area of expertise. I personally have been a utility engineer for about 40 years in various capacities over the years, but I significantly spent 27 years with the Texas Department of Transportation, where I was responsible for their subsurface utility engineering program, as well as for all the utilities that occupied TxDOT's right-of-way. So I've kind of been initiated into this investigation of what lies beneath for the majority of my career. Significantly about T2 Utility Engineers is that we've invested continuously over time in being an industry leader as this emerging practice of utility engineering has come into actual recognition. I've served on the American Society of Civil Engineers boards that prepared and published the standards that are now in place for the conduct of subsurface utility engineering. And one of the most important of those standards that has just been published in 2022 is ASCE 75, and that's the standard guideline for recording and exchanging utility infrastructure data. And I bring this up because it has been through that engagement for literally 10 years that T2 has been positioning itself to be in a position to answer questions about this emerging practice, and also had seen the future need for this digital transformation. And that's what this standard is all about. The standard is about how do we capture that data, how do we structure that data, and most importantly, how are we able to efficiently exchange this proliferation of utility data that now we're excited to be able to capture.
Oh, I think
So, thank you,
we
Joe.
may have lost John there. Are you guys hearing him? Oh. Okay, why don't we do this? While John's figuring out the tech side, maybe we'll jump into some questions for Jon King and Bruce Bacon, if that's okay.
Yep.
Great. So maybe I think I'd like to start the conversation with a bit of a story, but I think it's a story that represents a good launch point for answering the question, why does it seem that in the construction space, it seems to be difficult or a good challenge to adopt technology? And the story is, I have a colleague who recently decided they wanted to buy a new car and decided to buy a Tesla. Now, the entire process was facilitated by a phone. So they didn't have to go in anywhere. They didn't have to go to a showroom. They didn't have to go to a lending provider or any of these sort of typical things that we would think it takes to purchase a car. And at the end of the transaction, later on, the car just showed up. All of it was facilitated through a phone. So the starting question for everybody, and anyone can jump in at this point, is why do we think it's so difficult and such a challenge for us to adopt similar methodologies of making technology easy, adopting it within our organizations, and figuring out what it takes to get the value and the turnaround and the increased production or efficiency associated with those technologies?
All right, I'll jump, Joe, and that was a mouthful of a question, but I think there's a fundamental basic understanding that we need to embrace, and that is, culture will kill any change that comes along. So I mean, like, corporate cultures kill changes, and so anytime there's a change that comes to an organization, it has to be rolled out in a proper manner. I've got a real quick little story. So at a prior company, I got the fun assignment to help create an an engineering and training program for the project engineers on civil projects. And so we had about 6 or so of us that probably spent at least 6 to 9 months, something like that, working on this program. And they wanted it to be totally hands-free. You could just go online, sign up for a class, do the class, and just do a self-reporting. And so we spent all this time working on it. When we were finished, the person in charge just sent out the instructions to this 150 or so people and said, get started and go. And then here's the expectation, you'll do it, and let us know how it is. We'll check back with you. And after about a 3-month window, they looked at it and said, hey, no one's doing anything. And so 6 months went by, and they said, no one's doing anything. They're not getting engaged in this program. And what happened was they didn't anticipate that the change that they were recommending wasn't being communicated correctly, and no one could see the value. I mean, they're all busy. They're all working full-time jobs, and they couldn't see the value in getting engaged with this program when no one up the food chain seemed to support it. So we said, okay, let's go back and try this again. So we appointed a champion, someone who really got passionate about the program. We started small. We focused on one area instead of trying to roll everything out at once. We took one office here in Texas, introduced the program, built some excitement, showed the value. Then we sought feedback, and then we took that feedback, incorporated it into the program, and then we started rolling it out to other offices, and it was hugely successful. But I think in that quick story, what that tells you is you have to build support in any change that you're going to introduce in any culture. And I think people have to understand the value what it's bringing to them before they can get behind it. Otherwise, it's just another tool, and they've got already a quiver of tools that are going to keep them busy, from 7 to 5 every day. So that's what I think comes down to challenges in rolling out new programs, whether it be like a training program or a specific software program, a new one coming down the pipe. People have to understand the value.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Bruce. Appreciate that story. Jon Campbell, maybe same question to you on the Sioux side of things. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in the adoption of technology within your discipline?
Well, I appreciate the question. With my particular firm, T2 Utility Engineers, I actually joined the firm because of their expressed interest in being that industry leader. They wanted to be at the forefront of this recognized technological change that was affecting the practice of investigating subsurface utilities. So I actually am with the firm
Maybe we
that accepted
lost John
that
again. Why don't I
challenge of
shift
being on
the
that
questions
leading
over to
edge, which,
Jon
of course,
King within
is a daunting challenge in a
VRX?
changing
Maybe
environment.
talk a little bit about some of the
So I'd
challenges
say we
you've
had
seen.
a little
Sure.
different
Yeah,
challenge
I'll
because we
kind of
didn't
piggyback
have
off
to
of what Bruce was saying
challenge
is
the
that
corporate culture.
a lot of times
Our
we
culture, our
deal
identity
with
was
we
founded
don't want to
on
rock the boat
embracing
mentality.
technological change.
We've been doing
What
this
has
for
been
many
interesting-
years, and we've been doing it this way for many years, and we haven't had a problem with doing that. So we'll just keep, when we get the next project, we'll just keep moving forward with that mentality. Not so much specifically within VRX, but just in the civil engineering side of the industry in general. Is we've used these different methods for this long, and this is how we do it, and we'll keep moving forward. And we teach the younger ones that come up behind us that same mentality. So when we get this new technology that comes along, a different way of doing the same thing that we do every single day, there's a challenge of educating, some of the senior management on, this is a better way, or this could be a more efficient way of producing what we do on a regular basis. And sometimes that could be the challenge with, educating us older ones that have been doing this for a while of a quicker and easier way to do it. And some people get skeptical because a lot of times we get presented with a lot of different technologies, a lot of different software that's presented to us, and we might have tried one at one point and didn't have good success. Like Bruce was saying, you might not have good success on it, so you end up with the mentality of, well, we don't want to try that again. So yeah, we do have to take people that have are champions for it to be able to move it forward, to educate. And I think communication is one of the bigger things too. As we bring on software that as you're training your staff on it, that they're communicating with the management about what's the good parts of this and what's the bad part, and some of that comes through trial and error of how to make it better instead of we just go with the flow of the program. So I really think it's more about communication, efficiency, letting the staff know that we have a value with technology and moving it forward, and not getting trapped into, we don't want to make any change because we've done this in the past, and that's how we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, so Bruce, thanks, John. Bruce, John described what I would call sort of maybe senior or executive leadership status quo mentality. From your perspective, what are some of the dangers of not advancing technology and bringing some of these improvements from the future into the present?
Some of the dangers of doing that is you don't get better, and you'll get left behind. And so at a earlier this year, we had a conference we were at, and I told the story of my college professor who, from Louisiana State University, when we were graduating, we're kind of the last few days, someone asked the professor, Duncan Kinchin, they said, "Hey, Duncan, can you help us with some pearls of wisdom? What one piece of advice would you leave us with?" And just as quickly as the question got out of the mouth, the answer came. He said, "Change or you'll be left behind." I've remembered that. I can't remember what I had to eat last week, but I remember that. It's one of those things that's just stuck with me. You wind up, you can't take every change that comes, but you have to evaluate it, and you can't be set in your ways. If you're set in your ways, you miss the opportunity to be on the forefront of what's coming. And there's a lot of disruptive changes that are coming to our society and to our industry. And if we're not looking at the new technologies that are coming, I think it's rather limiting for the company.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, Bruce. So Jon Campbell, I'm going to give you a chance to sort of pick back up on the comments you were making around some of the challenges that you see in the SUE industry, specifically on the adoption of a digital transformation stance.
Well, hopefully I could stay with you a few more minutes in this response, but the biggest challenge within the industry is where that transformation has occurred. Like I said, I got into this business embracing technological advances that were characterizing our practice, did not anticipate that the biggest arena of change would be in the actual capture of the data, of the information that's out there and available, without having to go through the rigorous process of knocking on doors, asking for records, and really not getting what you need to characterize the subsurface environment. So I think within the SUE industry, where a lot of us looked towards the advancements in surveying technology to get much more precise locations described, looking at the advances in geophysical equipment that we use to detect subsurface utilities, that's where our mindset was. And when we started to see that the real leaps and bounds are coming in the actual availability of the record information that is the foundation of what we do. So even in an industry that was embracing this technological advancement and change, you still start to get some of that characteristic pushback when something new that you didn't anticipate comes along. So I think that's one of the challenges right now within our industry, because you'll have people stepping back and looking at this new technology, these new capabilities. Is it a complementary capability, or is it going to be a competitive capability for our firm's existence? So you get some of that type of change. But to me, I've been successful in my career by embracing change and the recognition that that's the only way that you advance and get better. And sometimes you take the risk of being on the bleeding edge as opposed to the leading edge of change.
Gotcha. Thanks, Jon. Jon King, let me shift the question set just a little bit. Same topic, but a slightly different angle on the question. And that is, we know that there are pressures on construction and companies who are in construction around margins and profits, and the adoption of technology has a cost. So how do you and or VRX view the budgetary considerations and the cost considerations to making decisions around technology?
Well, we definitely look at what the technology is, of course, and see how it best helps us on the daily basis. Really, it revolves around production from a consulting engineer side, and also doing construction management, is how we can perform our job and our task at a more efficient pace than we're currently doing it. The more efficient we are, the better our designs are, the better our inspection work is, and the better our reviews are. So the more we can embrace a technology that helps us achieve those goals, the better we are. So we're always looking for those types of opportunities. Fortunately at VRX, we have management that understand, and like Jon was saying that and Bruce was saying that if you don't embrace it, you're left behind. So we're always looking for opportunities to bring on different types of technologies and softwares that make ourselves more efficient, for what we're doing. So the challenge that we have is, of course, how do we pay for that, and this type of economy that we're in, where things are always, we're looking at our bottom line for that, and so and sometimes that comes at a cost, but it also comes at a cost of better production from our side. So even though there might be a high end front cost to it or a yearly maintenance cost to it, we also look at the metrics of how we're performing if we're doing that exact same task with this type of technology that moves us forward. So even though there might be the sticker shock that comes from it, we have to analyze that versus the production that we get from it. Especially with utility mapping software, there's different types of ways you can recoup those costs, and definitely on production side. So really, it's looking at the different platforms that we have, the different opportunities that we have, to be able to look at how that affects our bottom line and our productivity.
Thanks, John. Bruce, same question.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as John was talking, I was thinking back to a couple studies that I'd come across through the years. And we're always talking about how you balance the purchase of a new program, say, or incorporating something new into a program, into a culture of a company. And how do you balance that? Because if it's a one-to-one, it's probably not going to be investable. But if you go back to like a few years ago, Purdue in 1996 did a study, and they looked at what is it if for every dollar put in place to improve and quantify subsurface exploration, what was the return? What did they gain from that? And so in 96, that was $4.62, a very specific number. I haven't carried that forward to present years. I should probably do that. But a few years later, Penn State did one. I think it was around 2007. And they looked at it from the same lens and said, oh, well, according to their study, for every $1 invested, they would realize $21 saved. So some of that difference is going to be in just carrying from 96 up to 2007. But I think it's interesting that as we get more and more able to generate more programs and things like that, and yes, we have the inflation measures, and inflation's always going up. I get that. But it seems like the farther along the calendar years tick by, the more return on investment we get for that same dollar. So there's an increasing trend there. And when you look at things like 421 deaths in the last 21 years and due to utility strikes, if you look at just 2015 alone, Texas was 16% of all the utility strikes in U.S. and Canada combined. Now, not specifically the deaths, but it would kind of go to reason that your deaths should follow the strikes by some correlation. So if Texas is anywhere close to 16% of utility deaths over U.S. and Canada, I think that's a rather dubious title to hold that Texas should run away from as quickly as possible. So when you get into new programs and things that help your crews be more efficient, be it that you now know where utilities are that you didn't know before, then you know specifically the elevations of them. It's not just utilities, it's rock formations as well. Both of those can shut down projects, right? The other thing is, as a pre-construction manager, I'm always on the front end of the project looking at setting budgets. And the two things that seem, at least here in Texas, that seem to drive risks and contingencies are underground utilities and rock, elevations of existing rock, so geologic layers. And so the more that we can invest in understanding that and sharing that information collaboratively through the industry, I think the better we're all going to be and the safer we're going to be. So in terms of where we would be looking to, where I think our industry should be looking to spend the money and invest it should be on those things that provide certainty to the things underground, because that will help us tighten our estimates up even more, kind of control the risk.
Got it. Thanks, Bruce. Jon Campbell, while we have you here, maybe same question to you, picking up on the theme that Bruce just mentioned about some of the risk that they face. From a Sioux perspective, are the risks the same or different than, say, Bruce or Jon experience on the engineering and construction side of it?
Well, they're very different risks. They're all associated with the same consequences, that uncertainty of what's underground, what's going to impact your project. I did catch enough of Bruce's talk to hear him mention the studies that had been performed in validating the return on investment for utility investigations. I appreciate you running through that little bit of history, Bruce. But one of the issues associated with that risk from within the provider is just that, you know, you get accustomed to how you do things. You get accustomed to the information that you rely upon, and with any other effort, the risk that you're taking changes as well. As a Sioux provider, the risk that we transfer from the designer or from the constructor is key to what we're doing and what we're offering in value. Because that's the whole idea. This uncertainty exists because designers don't have adequate information about existing utilities early enough to take them into consideration. And if things happen the way they typically do, by the time we get to construction, there's still a lot of unknown. So the risks that the contractor, the constructor, the design builder bears is actually transferred over to the professional Sioux provider, or a portion of it is transferred over in order that we can give a greater level of certainty about where things are to inform the design of the project, or if we're right there at the shovel's end, just to prevent the damage to existing utilities.
Yeah, thank you, Jon. Let me take a moment to sort of shift directions again, shift gears a little bit. So same conversation, slightly different angle. It's been said that data is the new oil. So like crude, data is valuable, but if unrefined, it can't really be used. So under the umbrella of digital transformation, there is the concept that we are taking or partnering with technology providers to bring these efficiencies and bring this production in our workflows or our projects or whatever it happens to be to bear. But the flip side of that is often you can generate mountains and mountains of data. And unless you have a plan or a way in which you can utilize that data, make the most of that data, extract the value for decision making or other types of analytics, then you end up in a scenario where you've only gotten half of the equation. So Bruce, back to you. Tell us a little bit about your approach and maybe Sundt's approach to the data that is collected via the technology that you use and how you make the most of it.
Yeah, so if you go back not too far into the past, you know, on a typical design build pursuit for a roadway project, you know, we'd meet with our designers and we'd kind of outline what are the key pieces of information that we need. And so it's the requesting of the data you're talking about, Joe. And so that would fall into the designer's hands to look for as much information in their circles that they can pull forward for utilities. And so that's when companies like Jon Campbell's company gets involved in it as well. And so, but it's only as good as somebody can recall. And when you go to a lot of these franchise utility companies today, it's surprising, and even municipalities like some of the cities we deal with, they don't know where all their lines are. They don't always have good as-built, and even the GIS information that you can find isn't really adequate to help you. You may get the 2D information, but you're not getting that elevation, and you don't know how deep it is. And so that can impact projects a lot. And that's in the not too recent past, or not too far back past. As you move forward, though, we need GIS to improve. Okay, we need better information contained in these public systems, and we need more collaboration, and we need more tools that'll help us. And so, we've done a little bit of discussions with 4M. We really like platforms like that allow for a more than just a standard GIS data exchange. We need to have tools that are more collaborative, and I don't think as an industry we're there yet. But my goal would be that within the not too distant future that we wind up with a collaborative platform where when a project is as-built, that as-built winds up in a public domain that Sundt can get into and use. And yes, our competition would be in there as well. But you know what? It would take a lot of unnecessary dollars out of the bids, because we would have a better understanding of where all the utilities and geologic formations are. And so we're even though Sundt likes to try to be on the cutting edge, I'm not sure as an industry I think it's a rather low-hanging fruit situation.
Thanks, Bruce. Jon, maybe tell us a story about data and your view from a data perspective. Separate for a second the technology with what technology produces and your view on how to use that.
Well, I kind of compare it to a 3D scanner that a surveyor uses. You can set up a 3D scanner in this room right now and scan the whole room, and it's going to give you a million data points. I mean, it's going to get down to even the dust on the table, that it's going to give you that type of information. But if I'm looking for, let's say, a crack on the wall, I'm going to have somebody that's going to be able to data mine all that to be able to get to the information that I need. So in the world of utilities, what we've seen in the past is we could get a whole lot of data that comes in, especially in the urban environment. You might get plan sets that are, if you go down to do, like we used to do back in the day, go down to a vault and do record research. You'll get back plans that were, from the 40s and 50s that were hand drawn, that might show a right-of-way line and just a line down the center. But how do you use that information? You get all this data in, but how do you take that and interpret it to 70 years later where we're in now? So even though we can make a record request and we can go down to vaults and search and get all kinds of paper and CDs and PDF files back, it's taking that data and being able to put it into a product that's usable for us, that's not only usable but accurate. Like I said, if you're looking at plans from 1940, that might show a utility line as a single line that's 4 feet off the right of way, and then when you get out to the field, you actually dig it up and it's 2 feet off the right of way and it's actually a duct. But that's the only record that we have. So it's really important that not only that the data that we get is what we can find, but also usable. So in the grand scheme of things, we can get all the data that we want, but if it's not usable, then it doesn't mean anything to any of us. It has to be accurate. And that's to represent what's out in the real world now, which is like Bruce was saying, we're looking for technology now that can help us get that information more efficiently with less man-hour effort to put it in, especially from a pursuit standpoint when we're chasing projects.
Got it. Jon Campbell, while you were away, we collectively managed to blame you for the mountains of data that are out there that we struggle in general to get our arms around, to adapt to it as an organization, and then find ways to turn around that data to make it more valuable, to make better decisions. From the Sue perspective, you certainly are the sort of the instigator of the creation of lots and lots of data through the work that you do. Tell us a little bit about your view when it comes to the creation of data, maybe the transformation of that data into a usable set of data that you can pass along to your stakeholders in the utility industry.
Yeah, the nature of data is that unless it becomes usable information, it's just a proliferation of ones and zeros. And that's been the biggest challenge, is making that transformation of data into usable information. And then that's the kind of information that we want to report. Uh, you know, Conflating all of that available data into a focused piece of usable information is our current challenge. It's also why I think the proliferation of data is the biggest challenge that we faced in our industry right now, because it's going to be the matter of culling out what is good, usable information from that's just noise in the background, and also being able to tap into these new sources of information that are now being generated. From our point of view, first we get very excited about the technological advancements, this digital transformation, because it means we're going to have access to data that we've never had access to before. We very quickly see the ability to manage that data, and more importantly, to be able to put that data into usable information to report is the even larger challenge. So, I think we're in the right space. We need to be here embracing this technology in order that we can truth it out and actually incorporate it into better products for our clients, which include Bruce and John, in the construction and the design environments.
Got it. So we have about 15 or so minutes left on our panel today. Let me shift gears again and talk a little bit about what you guys individually see for your organization, let's say in the next 12 to 24 months concerning digital transformation. And then I'd like to end the conversation with more of a personal view of what you individually would like to see happen, or what you see happening on the digital transformation or the innovation of technology. And if you could wave the magic wand, what is it that you would like to see from your technology vendors and partners and providers out there in the market? So, John, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, it's a very exciting time for us. What I would like to see is sort of an industry-wide embracing of these new sources of information that we're able to put our hands on now, so that we can quickly get to an industry agreement that what we're building is kind of the universal standard going forward. For us personally at T2 Utility Engineers, we saw this challenge, this great opportunity coming years ago. And so we've been positioning ourselves with the recognition that, design is going to 3D design more often. And so we needed to get a robust data set that includes that vertical element. And we also see that from that 3D design, we can also then 3D model the subsurface environment. So that's the real direction that we see this the technological change, this digital transformation taking with regard to the output that we prepare and we provide. It will continue to have the challenge of, the things that you don't see and then you try to model to reflect those things you don't see is always going to still be a certain amount of uncertainty. So as we get better at depicting the subsurface environment in 3 dimensions and able to model infrastructure in 3 dimensions, we'll be making sure that we're staying tuned to the fact that unless you exposed every inch of that facility, there's still uncertainty about the more subtle changes in direction and the kinds of features, the subsurface features that are not captured by utility information. So, I see it as a very exciting time. I see it as taking our business forward rapidly so that we can provide better engineering products to our clients.
Got it. Jon King, same question. The next 12 to 24 months for your organization, and then maybe a thought or two about the magic wand, waving the magic wand on the future and what you'd like to see take place.
I think, like John said, moving into the 3D world is a big step forward for just the utility industry in general. We've so much been operating in a 2D world for the longest time. Having now the ability to get information on the 3D level, is a big game changer for all of us. So I think for the next 12 to 24 months for VRX in general, it's going to be about educating our clients and owners about this technology that's moving forward, how it can benefit them and benefit our projects, because this is not something that we've had for the longest from a construction management side of the picture. We've typically always depended on the design engineer, or we've had to depend on the contractor to provide the type of data for finding out what utilities are actually out there. So now bringing that back onto the CM side, where we can actually present to the client, say, hey, this is what because there's always a gap between when design finishes and when construction begins, which could be 12 months to when you start collecting data, that could be even more than 12 months or more to when we actually start putting the shovel in the ground. So providing a tool that will be able to identify any utilities that have been installed since the last SUE was performed. If we go back to traditional SUE, it's going to be a good tool for us to have on the CM side to provide to the client and the contractor to work together as a partnership. So in the next 12 to 24 months, I see that moving forward, just this technology that we have is here, and how it can benefit our projects to keep us more profitable, more efficient, and definitely more safe of knowing where utilities are. I think for just in general, having a 3D world of not having to send crews out into the field to locate utilities, or the man hours of having to do vac trucks in the field, and knowing elevations in the 3D side is definitely going to take us to a whole nother level once we start getting that information in, to be able to accurately know where elevations are in a vertical world, not just in a horizontal side too.
Thank you, John. Bruce, 12 to 24 months out for Sundt, and then sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so if I look backwards, I remember slide rules and scales and everything, and the evolution to get to digitizers, and digitizers getting to interactive computer takeoff programs like Bluebeam and OnScreen and others. But over the last 24 to 12, I know that's not the question you asked, but over the last, I think it's been really exciting to watch our estimators switch from the interactive computer takeoff programs to utilizing more design files and using MicroStation, Bentley products, Geopacks, whatnot, for actual takeoff of work that we're trying to quantify, right, for our estimates. So as I look at that progression, then what's next? How do you get beyond just using the design files? And I think when you start to embrace a concept of digital twinning and digital models that are presented at the procurement stage, like, okay, this is what we have that maps out everything. I think this is what Jon King was speaking to, when you have complete 3D knowledge of what's underground, right? And that comes to you in a set of plans, and your estimators can then spend less time trying to take off component pieces, but would be able to click on a shape and have them give it the full volume and the surface area. So less time quantifying work and more time analyzing the data that comes from those efforts to produce an estimate. So, from a guy who's got estimating in his blood and's had it there for a long time, I look for that for the future. I think that I've talked to other people and I've done some research in other states, and there are a couple states that are really leading the U.S. right now with digital modeling, as far as this is what you get at prior to bid, and unfortunately we're not in those markets yet. But I am really hopeful that within, like, I'm here in Texas, that TxDOT will be embracing that, and we'll be able to start to get more of that technology coming across our threshold.
Got it. Thanks, Bruce. So last question, and then I want to do one quick speed round after that. John Campbell, what would your advice? So we've all described sort of our tenure in the utility industry and the work that we've done. So what would be your advice to the next generation of, let's say, engineering students or young folks who are entering into the subsurface utility engineering space?
Well, I spend a lot of time having that exact conversation with young engineers. A lot of what I'm doing on behalf of the American Society of Civil Engineering is I'm taking education out on the road. One of the exciting things to tell the young engineers that I'm speaking with is that, hey, this industry did not exist when I graduated with my civil engineering degree. And I just by chance found myself on a path towards becoming a utility engineer. And I was one before we'd even named that as a subdiscipline of civil engineering. So what I talk to them about now is the excitement of the opportunity that they have. In one of the ASCE salary studies that we took a couple of years ago, utility engineer was second only to computer engineering for entry-level pay for graduate engineers. So one of the things that I'm constantly talking to them about is, this is an exciting arena of engineering practice. You've got a field component where you're out there actually doing investigations. Every job is different. There's always mysteries and unanticipated things, so it keeps the work exciting. But that's really my encouragement is to be bold and embrace that change, because technological advancement and changes are going to happen in the continuum, and if you're not there eagerly looking for it, then you miss so many opportunities. So I'm just real excited, and I do a lot of speaking with young engineer groups, and I've always got something to tell them.
Well, thank you, John. Real quick before I ask the same question of Jon King to the audience out there, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. If we're not able to get to them, of course, we'll distribute those to our panel, and they can certainly connect directly with you and answer those questions. Jon King, so young civil engineering students, what's your advice to them?
Like John Campbell said, we don't go to school to be utility engineers. We just kind of happen to fall into it and understand, the love for utilities. It kind of grows in that. It's kind of like a niche of civil engineering and transportation engineering in general. So we happen to pick it up somewhere and learn about it. So I think for the younger engineers that are coming up, there's still not really a track for it. Utility engineering. I know ASCE is working to come up with a track for utility engineering at universities. But it's about educating the younger engineers about what utility engineering is and the value that you can get out of your career, and how utility engineering brings in all different types of aspects of roadway and structures and any other kind of types of disciplines that we typically see for roadway design or transportation engineers, and helping them understand, how it can benefit them. I think definitely with, the 3D modeling that's coming about, especially from, the Bentley Open Roads that we're moving towards to with some of our clients. The technology side is now coming together. We now have 4M, utility mapping that's got the technology side coming together too. So it's, we can definitely promote, the technology advances that we're seeing, that, some of the other disciplines of civil and transportation are, still lacking behind, that we're moving forward with utility. So I think there's a lot of excitement because the younger engineers, they're very technology enhanced, and they want to see, different ways of doing the same job with different types of tools. So they're very eager to learn that. And I think, utility engineering, utility coordination, the utility efforts of construction management, this is a good way to push them into that. So I'm always promoting for my younger engineers to get into utilities. They're scared of it because they don't know it, because they've never been around it. But I think once they get into it, they understand, and they develop that love for what we all here have grown to love, which is, dealing with utilities and the challenges.
Great. Thank you, John. And Bruce.
So my advice would be to someone who's just coming out of school today is don't be comfortable in your knowledge, because that's where your competition is, and you need to be better than your competition. I would encourage them to embrace change and even envision where you want your future to be. The next few years in construction is going to bring so many advancements, in my opinion, that I just think it would be important for those coming out of school today or those changing into this field today to get involved and make it happen. But if you're going to be comfortable, that's where your competition is. You need to be better.
Yeah, great points, and thank you for that. Okay, we are coming up at the end of our time. I don't see any current questions that have come through. So sounds like maybe we answered everything that anybody could possibly want to ask us. So I would say great job. Also, I'd say thank you all on behalf of 4M, and thank you from myself. I appreciated all of your feedback. You certainly all bring a wealth of understanding and experience and knowledge to the conversation. And again, thank you so much. As we wrap up here, one final question. So your post-utility engineering career, you have three choices: golf, fishing, or diving. Bruce, you get to go first.
Diving.
One for diving.
Yep.
One vote for diving. Jon King.
I'm going to go with Bruce, diving. Never done it before, but I'm ready to try.
There we go. And John Campbell.
I wanted to say golf, but hey, after these two guys are going to go to the subsurface of the water, I'm with them. So I'll go diving too.
Well, I think that settles it. We have a quorum. Let's put together a diving trip, and Bruce can teach us all how to dive. So
let's go get some tanks and make it happen.
Yeah.
There you go. Gentlemen, again, thank you. That wraps up our panel discussion. We appreciate you very much. And to everyone out in our audience, thank you very much for registering, attending, and listening to our very insightful panelists. Thanks so much. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe.
Thank you.